It's Klayton, aka Celldweller, in collaboration with Vintage King, and today I'm going to talk about the beautiful, the powerful Make Noise Black and Gold shared system. This is a box of power right here. You can do so many things. I feel like if you were told you have only this piece of gear and you have to write an entire album just using this, that can be done easily and everything would sound different. So I'm going to give you a few different examples of what this thing can do sonically, but there's so many things that this can do that it'd be impossible in a short video to show you everything. So I started with an actual kick that I made on the DPO using the maths as an envelope to create a kick drum. I recorded that in, did a little EQ and compression on it because I wanted to use the DPO and the maths for other things during the patch. So the kick drum in this track, which sounds like this, was made 100% using the Make Noise DPO, which is an incredible oscillator, and the maths. So there's so many ways I could have gone, but I decided I wanted to do something simple and easy to understand, which is just a basic 4/4 kick, and write some patterns over the top of that so you can really hear what this thing can do. So in a nutshell, I'm using René to sequence pitches, 4 sets of 4 notes, and I'm changing each set using the pressure points. So every time I press the pressure points, you'll see here, it changes the bank. I'm using both oscillators in the DPO, a saw out the first oscillator and the final output, which basically takes both oscillators, one that cross-modulates the other, and you get this final output, which you can get some really cool, gnarly sounds out of. Maths is spitting out multiple envelopes that are going to multiple things, including the Optimix, which I'm using as a VCA. And so that's controlling the amplitude of each note that's being triggered. So I'm sending one of the oscillators out of the DPO into the Echophone as well, which is a great delay module that I use a lot. And from there, I'm going into the Verb, which is really a super cool and really flexible reverb. And then the other oscillator is completely dry, but I am doing things to actually modulate that, as well as the Wogglebug, the random stepped voltage output, which I use all the time for everything. If it could cook my breakfast and go to sleep with me at night, it's more than welcome to do that. Okay, for starters, we're only going to hear one oscillator with this kick drum that I recorded in from the DPO. So that's cool, but there's way more things I can do. So without going to the pressure points, because I've set the pressure points up to trigger the second oscillator, but if I don't hit the pressure points, you won't hear that. So I'm going to actually use the pads on René to actually change the banks of quantized note values that are going to the DPO, and you'll see what I mean once I actually do it. So there you go. There's 4 rows of pitches that will loop, and when I trigger one of the corresponding rows on René, it will switch to that bank and keep looping until I tell it otherwise. Now, the other cool thing that I can do, just showing this one oscillator, is how I used the stepped random voltage out of the Wogglebug to modulate the fall of the envelope, which is basically the release time of the envelope of the second channel of math, so the 4th channel of math, really. This is what that sounds like when I start to bring the Wogglebug, and what it basically does is it starts to let the envelope open a little bit more, and you'll hear really cool artifacts coming out of the DPO. The other thing the Wogglebug is doing is also modulating some of the parameters on the DPO that are making the tones change in the oscillator. This is cool, and I can sit here and play with this all day, but the next round of fun is when I start hitting the pressure points, which I have changing the pitch on René, or the banks of quantized values, as well as pinging another envelope that's opening up the second oscillator on the DPO. It's really the first on the DPO, but it's the second one in this example. So when I press these pads, you're going to hear another sound now that's going to come in that's running through the Echophone delay, which is really cool, as well as the Erb Verb, and I can control those things dynamically, which I'll do right now. As you can hear, when I select a note on the pressure points or one of these pads, it's actually opening the first channel of the maths envelope, which is slower to open and also slower to close. And I've got that saw wave, which is, there's a lot of harmonics up there, which are really bright. Plus it's running through the delay and the Erb Verb, which is adding more space to it, which is super cool. So then in addition to just switching patterns like that on the fly and creating some kind of cool variations, I can change the amount of stepped random voltage from the Woggle Bug, which will change the tone of the final output of the DPO, as well as the release envelope on the fourth channel of maths, which will then give me a more dynamic pattern. So it's not just one single plucky kind of thing, but the plucks are really short, and sometimes they're really long, and everything in between. And while that's all going on, I can control the wet dry amount on the Echophone, add more or less delay. I can hit this freeze button on the Echophone, which is a super cool trick. I'll show you in a second. And then as well, I can change the wet dry mix on the Erb Verb. And a lot of that is me doing this manually. You can be sending voltages into the Erb Verb, into the Echophone, and so many other destinations to randomly or dynamically change parameters, and you'll hear things change on the fly. So let me show you an example now of that patch running and me dynamically changing the wet dry mix on the Echophone, on the Erb Verb, using the freeze function on the Echophone, which is super cool as well. And then you can hear how you can turn this into a really dynamic track. So thanks for sticking through this video and listening to me rave about the Make Noise Black and Gold shared system. If you want to see more of this, because there's lots more coming on my channel, you can save this playlist or subscribe to my channel. And until then, this is Klayton, aka Celldweller, signing off.